a very good morning to my co-panelists, to Gustav Lindström and to Charles Fries, and to all of those who are following us by video. A word of thanks to the EUISS for organizing this, especially to Daniel Fiat, and for responding to the challenge that we laid out to help us debate this, help us throw around ideas at this crucial moment in which we're looking for input, we're looking for creativity in the development of this, what we believe to be a very important CSDP guiding document. Now, going straight into the issues. One of the questions, perhaps the first question that we have to address, is the old question. For many years, it was assumed that the EU should aspire to be a civilian power, partly because it could not be anything else, because 27 member states could not possibly develop a common approach that would allow us to have, for example, a document that would have some kind of strategic value. So can we have such a document of strategic value? And I here unequivocally would like to say, yes, we're obviously by no means a homogeneous bloc. We're not going to become a homogeneous bloc. And I don't think there is any reason to want us to become a homogeneous bloc. But certainly we have common interests that are today much more clearly identified than they were a few years ago. We have some differences in our sense of strategic priorities, but we have actually come a very long way. I've been defense minister for 2 years and 4 months. And during this relatively short period of time, I have seen already a lot of convergence amongst the member states. A second aspect of this issue is that we are considerably enriched by our diversity. The European Union strategic orientation cannot correspond to the vision of any single member state, but it will be much richer from the fact that a diversity of historical and geographical perspectives are brought into play. Of course, our heterogeneity introduces some limitations, but I would argue that at this point in our collective lives, we have the capacity and we have the will to develop a common strategic outlook that is quite substantive. The challenge that we face is that we must avoid making it the kind of document that we could have produced 5 or 10 years ago, which we sort of a set of banal considerations that represented the lowest common denominators. Statements that everybody could agree to, but which actually would not advance us at all. That is something that we should definitely avoid. So my first point is that diversity brings richness, but it also brings the responsibility of developing a document that is challenging and that not everybody will be completely happy with. If everybody is indeed totally happy, then maybe we have not been successful. But hopefully, all will be able to recognize that the compass takes us forward and that if there are aspects they are not comfortable with, there are also many other aspects that compensate for that. So that should be our aim as we set out. The joint threat analysis prepared by the EU Intelligence and Situation Center, based on contribution from national intelligence services, is a good starting point. And so is the scoping paper, which was recently presented by the EAS, as well as the design that has now become very consolidated with the establishment of 4 baskets, which are the pillars of our future strategic compass: crisis management, resilience, capabilities, and partnerships. So this takes me to the core of my address, which is about what I believe that we should be addressing as we take forward the work on each of these 4 baskets. So on crisis management, we need to be able to respond effectively to security crises that affect our core interests. So we have to have the ability to develop CSDP missions and operations that correspond to our needs. So this means that we have a number of practical requirements. We need more robust command and control systems. We need better advanced planning based on likely crisis scenarios. We need more effective force generation. In many cases, we need more robust and flexible mandates for our missions. This in turn means staffing more adequately the EU military staff and the military planning and conduct capability. But before we reach this point, and here I would like to be provocative, we need to think about what we would like our level of ambition to be, namely what kind of crisis we should be able to address. Admittedly, this is a difficult one. Certainly, territorial integrity, for example, this is the dominion of NATO for most of us, and we should not be duplicating processes. But what about threats to member states that are below the threshold of threatening territorial integrity? In the age of hybrid warfare, this is indeed the most probable. Are we willing to say that we should be available to collectively face foreign subversion or disturbance of our societies when it is not the kind of threat that NATO has the means and procedures for dealing with? At the very least, I think that this is the moment when we should be asking ourselves this question so that we can include some level of ambition when we talk about crisis management. The second basket is about resilience. The EU global strategy points to the need to foster resilience and for the EU to assist in protecting its members upon their request. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, has underlined the need to do much better in dealing with complex emergencies. And hostile actors have increasingly resorted to hybrid attacks. So this is a whole of government or a whole of society task. And Gustav Lindström in his opening words made some reference to this. But I think that defense has a vital role. And of course, this links up to the point that I made previously about level of ambition. When we speak of resilience, which aspects in particular should the strategic compass aim to promote? Resilience is a word that has been used so extensively over the past year that it could be taken to mean almost anything. I would suggest that in the specific context of the strategic compass, it should be taken to include two aspects. On the one hand, anything that might be the object of enemy action, which requires us to be very dynamic in the scoping and identification of possible enemy actions. And on the other hand, also, any aspect that might require the extensive employment of military capabilities. In this case, for example, the COVID-19 emergency, which was not enemy action, fits the second aspect. It doesn't fit the former case. Both of these categories require us to go well beyond the roles of defense ministries and foreign ministries and require us to establish mechanisms for working with many other dimensions of our European and national institutions. By way of example of the type of paths that we need to be exploring, I would suggest the development of an EU situational awareness system using big data, using artificial intelligence to provide member states in the European Union with early warning on risks and relevant updated information about threats, strategic reserves, and supply routes. Another aspect related to this is that we need to explore the possibility of giving ourselves a basis in international law for identifying and collectively responding to hybrid attacks, which are not armed attacks and which fall into a legal vacuum. As a major contributor to a rules-based international order, the European Union should be attentive to the need for new rules in our rapidly changing world. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided us with a rich set of examples of raw lessons and best practices that should be the basis for a joint civil-military doctrine in response to complex emergencies. And we should be developing regular exercises to streamline procedures. We need to be developing mechanisms, for example, that allow us to rapidly employ military capabilities of one country in another country in response to civil emergencies. Cyber, another evident example from the times in which we live. We should be considering setting up an EU cyber defense unit to supplement and coordinate our national efforts. Finally, I should say that I am very pleased to see the relevance given to maritime security in the EES scoping paper. We are highly dependent on maritime security, and we are not collectively very much aware of this. So it's very good that we should be thinking of this in the context of our strategic compass. The third basket deals with capabilities. On this, I believe that we are on the right path, but we need to retain the focus. And in a context in which 21 out of 27 member states are also allies in NATO, the issue of capabilities has to be carefully coordinated with NATO. We have our own requirements and dynamics, but if you will exclude the cliché, we have a single set of forces. There is actually already considerable defense spending in the European Union, but there is very little coordination. And so a more intense and purposeful focus on instruments that we have already developed, namely the European Defence Agency, PESCO, and the European Defence Fund, are major steps in the right direction. Communicating with the public is a fundamental part of this. And of course, we have different publics across the European Union, with different sensitivities, with different approaches, with different histories, and we need to be able to take this into account. We have to make sure that Europeans understand that investment in defense is also a major contribution for a more dynamic European economy, which is able to compete in technological innovation and high-paying jobs. So investing in new technologies is vital for future global geostrategic competitiveness. Developing this awareness will in turn allow for a sustained and well-coordinated level of investment in defense, which is exempt from major budgetary cuts. Last but not least, regarding partnerships. The EU global strategy states that in the pursuit of our goals, we will work with core partners, like-minded countries, and regional groupings. We do partnerships well, but we should do partnerships better, and we should do them more strategically. This means intensifying cooperation and giving new dimensions to the work with traditional partners, such as Canada, Norway, and in the future, hopefully, the UK, creating not only ad hoc cooperation mechanisms, but wide-ranging partnership structures. But first and foremost, this dimension should include a much stronger partnership with the US. In areas like hybrid threats, the impact of disruptive technologies, capability gaps, and how to address strategic competitors, the EU is the most effective ally of the United States. So we believe that there should be a yearly EU-US security and defense dialogue at the ministerial level. Other vital partners are multilateral organizations, primarily NATO and the UN. Portugal has always been very strongly committed to EU-NATO cooperation, respecting the differences of each organization, but profiting from relative advantages. Alongside the specific technical dialogues in areas like military mobility, we think that there should be a special focus on regular strategic dialogues, including via permanent liaison officers, but also at the ministerial level. And it happens, but I can tell you from the experience of a defense minister, it does not happen in a very deep manner. We have to make sure that the strategic compass is articulated with the likely revision of the NATO strategic concept, probably a revision to give us a new strategic concept in 2022. So both institutions in 2022 are likely to have important new guiding documents. It's important that there should be some kind of coordination between these two processes. And this needs to happen at the high-level political dialogue, but also at technical level. The strategic EU-UN partnership should also be enhanced with the strong commitment of the 27 to the UN Charter, including closer and better coordination on the ground between CSDP missions and UN missions, including in the structure of mission mandates on both sides. We clearly need to enhance the defense dimension of partnerships with African countries and with regional organizations. Cooperation with the African Union and with the sub-regional actors such as ECOWAS, ECAS, Gulf of Guinea Commission, SADC, IGAD, G5 Sahel, all of these should be strengthened in order to fulfill our aim of a more mature and balanced partnership with those institutions. The pilot case of the coordinated maritime presences in the Gulf of Guinea should foster cooperation with the Gulf of Guinea Commission and with ECOWAS in particular in the field of maritime security and capacity building, which is a crucial vulnerability that affects European security. I don't wish to be exhaustive, but obviously we should also be looking at opportunities to develop security and defense partnerships with new or less frequent partners in Asia and Latin America, which are regions of growing geopolitical competition, namely a more active and regular dialogue as well as operational cooperation with, for instance, ASEAN, India, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea. we should also work to enhance partnerships with Latin America, for example, Colombia and Chile, that have already cooperated with CSDP missions in the past, as well as with Brazil, a strategic partner of the European Union. Maritime security, the fight against organized crime and terrorism, for example, are areas of important shared interest with those Latin American countries, and that means shared opportunities. All of this needs to be underpinned by much better, much more regular political dialogue at the level of defense and foreign ministers with their counterparts from those countries. So I will stop there, but I'd like to end by reiterating the importance that we attach in this phase to debate and to dialogue with the European strategic community and amongst the political decision makers. This event is an excellent example of the former. We need to have our think tanks, we need to have our strategic networks engaged in creating a rich tapestry of ideas that can allow for an ambitious strategic compass. At the same time, political level discussion is essential to the success of this guiding document, and we have not had enough of it, which is why I will be holding a political level seminar on the strategic compass in the second half of April. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to hearing the report on today's exchange of views, and I am sure that it will be feeding in to the work that we're all going to be doing on the strategic compass. Thank you.